Violence. The kind of thing that brings friends and families together. Despite what misguided, issue-dodging politicians may tell you, violent video games can be a whole lot of fun. The glorious Mortal Kombat franchise being a huge example of this. Super Smash Bros. Is more of my speed when it comes to fighting games, but I can appreciate the entertainment value that comes from button mashing as the goofiest character that fun-loving game designers could come up with, only to get that satisfying victory against a friend with one of these.
Kung Lao wins. Flawless victory. Fatality.
But yes, these games are a lot of fun. So much so that I was that kid in high school who would sneak their Xbox into their suitcase when on the annual choir tour, pulling it out in my hotel room and then inviting other boys to come join the contraband fun. That being said, my intention is not to talk about the games specifically today, but rather to share some quick thoughts on the movies that spawned as a result of their popularity. Of course, the centerpiece of my video today will be the brand new Mortal Kombat film that debuted in theaters and HBO Max a couple of weeks ago. But given that there are a few in existence, and of quite varying degrees of quality if I might add, I thought, why stop there? So I decided it would be fun to share some quick thoughts on all three of the theatrically released live-action Mortal Kombat movies in chronological order. The first being Mortal Kombat in 1995, then Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and capped off by the brand new R-rated reboot. And yes, these will be short reviews, so don't expect me to go in-depth with all of them. I'll only spend a couple of minutes on each film. That being said, let's get started with the original film from 1995. Video game movies have always had a sour reputation, but this was most especially the case in the 90s. This was back when geek culture, particularly the idea of gamers, was such a backwards and foreign concept to the generation of people who were in the business of making movies. You can call that a generalization if you will, but if you just look at the video game movies of the era, it's abundantly clear that the people who produced such films had no idea what they were doing. They still don't, for goodness sakes. But thankfully, the original Mortal Kombat is kind of that odd one out in the realm of video game movies, in which a lot of people actually consider it to be an underappreciated cult classic. After having watched it with my wife, I would actually kind of agree. Granted, I would hesitate to call Mortal Kombat a quote-unquote good film. It's full of all the 90s campiness and cheesy performances you would expect of a film from this era. Well, a super commercialized and demographic-targeted product film anyway. It should also come to the surprise of nobody on planet Earth that the story is massively stupid. My apologies to my friend Chris, who's probably watching this video. Yet surprisingly, many parts of this movie feel genuinely faithful to the spirit of those games. Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, for example, is just straight up awesome as Shang Tsung, giving line readings that are probably more iconic than the same lines from the games themselves.
Your brother's soul is mine.
Most of the other performances are pretty laughable, but more in an unironically enjoyable kind of way, since the actors seem to have bought into the silliness of it all. And despite the fact that the film is PG-13, Paul W.S. Anderson, yes, that Paul W.S. Anderson, somehow made the action fun enough to watch without having to implement a ton of gratuitous violence. These scenes are actually composed with complicated choreography and impressive set design, with the fight between Scorpion and my main Johnny Cage being a particular standout in this surprisingly extensive set. Mortal Kombat is far from high art, as I would be more inclined to call it a commercial for the game than an actual narrative you can be invested in, but at least it understands that what most people look for from a movie based on this intellectual property is just to see a lot of cool fights, and thankfully, Mortal Kombat actually delivers on that. The fight scenes are hilariously awesome, compensating for a lot of the boring filler that connects them together. So yeah, I didn't expect to find a lot of enjoyment out of this, but I actually really did, enough to truly call it my favorite video game movie. I mean, the bar is rather low as far as that's concerned. Sonic the Hedgehog and Detective Pikachu were passable movies, but I would never feel the need to watch them again, whereas Mortal Kombat is dumb fun that I would happily sit through if someone randomly suggested it. Unlike its sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which is pretty much a crime against humanity. Okay, maybe that's stretching things a little bit too far. I can't say with 100% confidence that this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. To make such a claim, I have to experience a combination of intellectual befuddlement by witnessing a complete bumbling failure at making art, while also becoming fueled by unbridled hatred and rage. Movies like these are the kinds that fill my soul with such pronounced negative energy. Mortal Kombat Annihilation may be astoundingly incompetent, but it's hysterical. If I got together with my friends and we made a commentary track of us roasting this thing for 90 minutes straight, we'd have a blast. Watching this movie feels like the producers were trying to make a 99-cent version of Power Rangers, while somehow piecing together even less impressive visual effects, fight scenes, and performances than even the regular Saturday morning TV show did. I couldn't tell you what kind of process the writers and filmmakers went through to craft this story, but I can say with certainty that it's a far cry from what was accomplished by the original, as weird as it is to say that. Say what you will about that film's story, but at least it had one. You could understand why Liu Kang had an emotional reason to participate in the tournament, even if the overall stakes of the plot or the other characters' motivations didn't make as much sense. But here, every single plot point and even line of dialogue is delivered without rhyme or reason. The story sort of operates on the Halo 5 logic that everyone in the audience is going to be a Tolkien-level expert on all of the lore, characters, and meaningless jargon, not to mention that each viewer will need a photographic memory of what transpired in the original, since Annihilation picks up quite literally moments after that film ended, albeit with any proper exposition to fill in someone who never saw that movie. The rest of the story is just a bunch of random nonsense with no discernible connective tissue, bridging the gaps between each scene. Things happen only because the writers put their ideas down on a page and the director filmed them, but the mangled mess that is the screenplay doesn't even hold a candle to the abysmal quality of the performances, visual effects, and camera work. I would suggest watching Chris Stuckman's Hilariosity review of this movie if you want a more in-depth breakdown of this movie's abominable use of production value, but I hope that at least the footage included in this video speaks for itself, and it should go without saying that this movie is some of the worst line readings in recorded film history, with this line being particularly memed compared to the rest.
Too bad you will die.
What the is that?
But you know what? The sheer incompetence of this putrid dreck will probably give you a good laugh, as it did for me. I would imagine that if you had any shred of legitimate expectations of quality from a Mortal Kombat movie, it probably would have been for the hard-edged R-rated reboot that just came out. This is the movie I have the most to say about. You know, I wouldn't blame you if you did have high expectations for this, because not only were the trailers promising something of much higher production value than the originals, it seemed like the filmmakers were taking their project much more seriously. Not that they seemed to be making the Mortal Kombat equivalent of The Dark Knight, mind you. The trailers just seemed to telegraph that they were paying genuine respect to the spirit of the games from both aesthetic and tonal standpoints. When I actually sat down to watch the film, I was pleased to discover that the opening prologue was shockingly effective, far more than what I expected anyway. Pretty much everyone who has seen this movie agrees that this is the best segment of the film. Sure, the deaths of Hanzo/Scorpion's family are kind of telegraphed from the second the movie started, and from that sense the prologue is predictable and cloying, but this opening is still much better than it has any right of being, and if the film remained on this wavelength, it honestly could have been great. The thing is though, it didn't, and suffers horribly as a result. When talking about the original movie earlier, I talked about how that movie delivered on the idea of cramming a lot of different fights into a film. Mortal Kombat 2021 does this as well, and many of them actually feel more cinematic than those 90s movies, but a critical flaw that kept them from being truly amazing for me is how the film approached its characters. They didn't need to be put through any sort of dramatic arcs, but what I would have appreciated is if the story gave us reasons to care about them fighting. There's talk about a new generation of fighters needing to assemble from Mortal Kombat in order to save Earthrealm, which is consistent with the games, but the problem is we never see these stakes actually come to fruition in any sort of tournament. What the movie is really about, when you break it down piece by piece, is just setting up the franchise. Did you see the article about how the actor playing Sub-Zero was contractually obligated for up to 5 movies if this one was successful? That's probably because they were simply using this movie as an economic test run rather than actually telling a story, regardless of whether or not it would have been anything to write home about. The focus for each character, even our brand new original character Cole Young, is not to give them any relevant emotional reason to fight other than the fact that they have a bodily marking reminiscent of the series logo just given to them as like a rite of passage. Rather, the goal is for them to discover what is called their arcana, or in other words, a secret ability that distinguishes them from other fighters. You know, Jax having massive robotic arms, Liu Kang's ability to conjure fire, and Kano shooting lasers out of his right eye, just to name a few. That's fine if you want to pay respect to the original characters. I think most fans would want that. But it's so cynical and transparent what Warner Brothers was trying to do with this. They simply wanted to have an excuse to lazily set up this world so that they can make more movies later on. Tease the fans with a cool trailer, make a quick buck on some recognizable iconography, and then make the movies people would actually want to see if they're successful. And even then, they might just use those sequels as bloated trailers for other movies. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that's the kind of crap producers tried to pull with movies like Fant Four Stick and Batman vs Superman, and we all know how those turned out. Mortal Kombat had potential to be a solid adaptation of those games between the aforementioned prologue, impressive visual effects, and the gore, but I honestly hate the fact that its story is structured in such a Hollywoodized, trendy fashion. My wish is that Hollywood would just go back to making a great, self-contained movie first, with room for a sequel, and then go make more if the opportunity presents itself. But you know, a bunch of greedy jerks in suits won't listen to some 26-year-old cisgender white guy in Arizona complaining about that. I just like good movies, and even more than that, I want video games to earn the respect they so rightfully deserve among snobbish cinephiles. With Mortal Kombat though, that won't happen. With its incomplete story, stilted acting, and lazy storytelling, the film is anything but a flawless victory. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the 3 theatrically released Mortal Kombat movies. I hope you enjoyed hearing what I had to say about them. If you did, feel free to let me know in the comments, and please consider subscribing to the channel as well as joining the notification squadron so that you don't miss out on future videos. Before you go though, feel free to stick around a little longer. As teased in the beginning, I have something fun to cap this video off with. My wife and I enjoy playing the Mortal Kombat games against each other from time to time. Both of us are pretty casual players, but we have fun in each match we play. In the spirit of me reviewing the movies today, I thought it would be cool to show you some of our matches I captured and cut together for your personal enjoyment. We don't have any commentary for these matches, but we hope you at least have fun watching them. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great one.
Explain yourself.
I'm just a guy who hates bugs.
This one will ensure your death.
Round 1. Fight! Round 2. Fight!
You're what the buzz is about?
Final round. Fight! Vora wins.
Challenge us at your peril.
Not challenge, kill.
You have been warned.
Round 1, fight. Final round, fight.
Feel my bite.
Finish him. Ermac wins.
I've always admired you, Princess.
Your jealousy of Liu Kang shows.
That is not what I meant.
Round 1, fight. Finish her! Kung Lao wins.